Guess how many they did? None. Okay? Chapter number 1, right? In 2018, a guy by the name of Del Bigtree, who knows Del Bigtree? He has a great, every Thursday he was on an incredible podcast. I've had the honor of sharing the stage with him at different times. He is doing a deep dive into everything going on. He, along with Robert Kennedy Jr., when Donald Trump was first in office, he got them all hooked up, and he actually helped them get this happen. They sued HHS and the CDC and the FDA, saying, where are all of the safety studies that you were by law supposed to submit with all the new vaccines, which you'll see in a minute. All of a sudden we have tons of vaccines. And they absolutely had none to show. So that time it was 32 years. We are now 36 years later, and they have not done one safety study for all the vaccines that have been introduced. To me, that's a crime against humanity. That's a crime against American children.
That's right.
So they were sued, and that's what happened. 38 years now, not one safety study. At the same time that Ronald Reagan signed that act, they put something called the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System together. Doctors are required by law, if you see a child with any kind of symptom after vaccination, you must report it so that we can keep track of this, right? Congressional testimony in the year 2000, Congressman Dan Burton found out that only 1% of any vaccine injuries get reported. So that whole system has been failing. And then, the vaccine injury compensation system is for people whose children die or are really seriously injured and they know it was the vaccine. They literally have to go before a panel of 3 appointed masters, appointed by the CDC, and they have to ask for compensation to take care of their sick child who's probably crippled, no more talking, no more language, maybe feeding tubes in it. They have to beg for financial support to get their child taken care of. And right now, I mean, they've already settled over $5.2 billion, and 80% of those cases never get before the masters. You can't have your injured child in the courtroom, so they don't get to see the injured child. The parents have to go there with an attorney and fight for the funds, and if your child dies, they give you $250,000 to compensate you for your lost child. And to make matters worse, the money that they give out comes from a tax put on your vaccines that you're giving to your children. 75 cents on every vaccine goes into this system to pay for the injuries, because Big Pharma is off the hook. Does that sound like even fair?
No.
By the way, you guys can speak up. We're taping this, okay? So I love participation in the audience. This is a very corrupt system, and that's why I'm so dedicated to doing what I've been doing for all these years, okay? And also, in the mid-1970s, you know, something happened. When I was a kid growing up, we had one doctor, the family doctor, as I mentioned, he had a shingle on a building. And then in the 1970s, they developed a pediatrician. The pediatrician became the baby's doctors. And in the beginning, it was because they didn't have any instrumentations for doing surgical procedures for infants. And I get that. They had to create the instruments for little babies. That's how it started. But then it became, well, let's become the baby doctors. And you know, the whole time I was having my children, no pediatrician, people would say, oh, who's your pediatrician? And I would say, I don't have one. What do you mean you don't have a pediatrician? It's like we all think we have to have a pediatrician. I'm like, show me the law. It doesn't exist. Well, we're programmed, right? Anyway, 1960, 97% of all children were healthy. 3% had chronic illness. 1970, 94% of all children were healthy, and 6% had chronic illness. 1994, we had a huge decline. 88% of the children are healthy. I'm sorry, it began the decline, and 12% had chronic illness. By 2006, further decline, where 74% of children were healthy, 26 had one chronic illness, and now in 2020, over half, 52% of our children are chronically ill with asthma, diabetes, learning problems, food allergies, neurological injuries, seizures, depression, anxiety, and all of those kids are now on medications. Okay? I believe the pediatricians, if I was a pediatrician, I would be hiding because I would be embarrassed about this record. You're the baby doctors, and look what's happening to the children in our country. something has to change. But you see, they get paid very well from the vaccine manufacturers to get children vaccinated. It says right here, they get bonuses, 250 to 400 per family of vaccinated patients. 1,000 kids equals 250K to 400K per doctor. Multi-doctor offices earn millions. They're funded by insurance companies, but who funds them? Doctors get zero training on vaccine ingredients. I'll cover that in a minute. There's no guarantee of immunity. We'll be covering all that. So basically, they get all this money to do it without question and without liability. So, basically, did that screen do wrong? Yeah, something happened. Okay, there we go. I already showed you that. The prevalence of autism in the US, in 1931, it was really, really rarely heard of because that was the first year they started putting thimerosal in vaccines. And that was the first year Leo Kanner described a child with autism. Never before seen in history. They're not normal. It's not normal, you guys. When I was growing up, we had children with cerebral palsy. In a big school outside of Detroit, we had one classroom of children who were deprived of oxygen during the birth process, leading to cerebral palsy. We did not have children who were stimming, nonverbal, hitting their head, not being toilet trained. I mean, it just goes on and on. And then you can see this increase. By 1980, 1 in 10,000. That would have been the year my daughter Renee was born. 1995, 1 in 500 children now have autism. By 2001, 1 in 250. 2004, 1 in 166. 2007, 1 in 150. 2009, 1 in 110. 2012, 1 in 88. 2014, 1 in 68. And by the way, in 2012, my daughter, Dr. Renee Hunter, who's in Goose Creek, and I and another girl, Karen Hubert, were putting on conferences to address the crisis on autism. Because we knew exactly what was causing it. We believed because we would have children, we were teaching doctors how to heal children with autism. It was a 3-day conference with every kind of specialist you can imagine, dealing with every part of the body you can imagine. And children were recovering. If you know what injured them and you address the injury, and they get language back, they get eye contact back, they stop stimming, they start sleeping better, they're no longer bloated and having severe body rashes. If you watch children heal like that by addressing the vaccine injury, you think you might say the vaccine caused the injury? Yeah. Okay, our government didn't want nothing to do with that. We did it for 5 conferences and we had to give up because it was just a tremendous amount of work. We were like decades ahead of ourselves. Anyway, that's when I started really getting involved in this. And now, it's 1 in 35 children. And it's probably worse than that, I'll tell you why. They start looking at school statistics to get this number. We have a lot of 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds that are showing signs of autism before they get to school. It's probably more like 1 in 25, which is devastating. I make the comparison. What if 1 in every 25 children in the United States was going blind? Do you think they would get to the bottom of it? I would think. But that's not what's going on. Instead, it's ignore it. Make everyone think it's better diagnosis. Make everyone think it's just something else in the environment. Let them think it's genetic. You cannot have a genetic illness like this in 1 generation. The gene pool does not change that fast. That's all BS, okay? And guess what? You can see right there, when they added the financial liability, all of a sudden our stats start to jump. Because that's when they started introducing a whole lot more vaccines. This is an incredible picture. This is the first year of life. In 1986, we got literally about 6 vaccines in 1986, the first year of life. And they weren't given the day of birth. Now, in 2024, this represents what the babies are getting the first day of life. Would you even think, you don't even have to be a doctor to realize that this can't be real. Are we really doing this to our babies? Okay? It's happening. That's why I'm so passionate about it. The more people I wake up, the more people we can help save. This is just a chart, a graph showing that there was a 370% increase in autism since the year 2000, the last 25 years. And again, this is where we introduce the immunity from any vaccine injury, and look at it. It took them a couple of years to start ramming out those vaccines. They had to do a little bit of, vaccine research and development, and then all of a sudden they started hitting, and now look at that. This just shows how, the more children, the more kids that get vaccines, the more injury they have. So, it's a new phenomenon, autism, the last 40 years. It's a crisis for the families. I have 5 healthy children and 13 healthy grandbabies. Life is still tough. How do these parents get along in life when they have a child who can't talk, who's not potty trained, who can't eat, who's very picky, who has body rashes, who's melting down because of environmental toxicity? How do they function? You see, this is an attack on the family. And this is Satan's job, okay? He's using the medical profession to attack our families. So this is exactly, and interesting how he always went after the boys in the Bible. Autism, if you have 5 kids on autism, 3 to 4 of them are boys. Yeah? It's the truth.
San Francisco is one of the towns.
Right now, you know what they did in San Francisco? A couple of years ago, Senator Pan made it illegal for a child to go to school without any vaccines. They removed the religious exemption in California. And within a 4 or 5 year period, it's now 1 in every 12 children.
Wow.
If that isn't a study right there for the government to say, gee, maybe we did something wrong here. So, the final crisis is $2 million per case, a crisis for our schools. I'm sorry. And Congressman Van Burton said it will cost about $2 million per case to take care of these kids, just to house them and feed them throughout their life. And they're all growing up now. We have full-grown adult boys who wear helmets and drink from bottles and are wearing adult diapers.
Oh.
And their parents are stuck in the home. They can't go anywhere. They don't have a normal life. Their lives have been torn apart by this. And vaccine manufacturers censors admit that they can cause autism. This isn't Mary Tocco's opinion. The MMR vaccine comes with a huge insert, and it says right in there, can lead to cause autism and other neurological problems. So, there was a group in 1999 called the Verstraeten Group. They analyzed the government's vaccine safety data, which, by the way, is a secret database that nobody's allowed to go to or see unless you get special clearance. And when you go, you can't take anything but a notepad and a pencil, I kid you not. And they were able to get in there and analyze the vaccine safety data, and they said, comparing the vaccinated to the unvaccinated, there was a 1,135% elevated risk for those kids who were vaccinated. And this was just came out in July 10th. This is brand new that this came out. Robert Kennedy, by the way, has known this for years. He's the one who said it. He said they looked at the data, they looked at children who had received the hepatitis B vaccine within the first 30 days of life, and compared those children to children who had received the vaccine later in life, and found that 1,135% elevated risk of autism among the vaccinated children. You would think the government would say, no more vaccines day of birth. We've got to stop this. A moratorium on the Hep B vaccine. They don't. They blindly just go along with everything. This information shocked them, Kennedy said, so they kept the study secret, and then they manipulated it through 5 different iterations to try to bury the link. And we know how they did it. They got rid of all the older children, essentially, and just had younger children who were too young to be diagnosed. And they stratified the data, and they did a lot of other tricks. All of these studies were the subject of trickery, end quote. Robert Kennedy Jr., this month. So, right now, we spend about $1.7 trillion medically treating all of these sick kids. 75% of our children cannot qualify for military service. Imagine that. Imagine that. What's going to happen 20 years from now, guys, when we don't have an army? That's a military, that's a major problem. Teenage males, 50% less sperm count and testosterone now lower than men 65 years old. Because the vaccinations contain things that kill sperm and cause infertility. This is not an accident, okay? I believe, and I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, I believe it was on purpose. Girls have puberty 6 years earlier than boys, and Gardasil vaccine linked to ovarian failure, which is infertility. And that when that came out, girls have cervix. They said it's for cervical cancer for girls. All of a sudden they're saying all the boys had to have it too. I'm like, wait a minute now. I thought it was a cervical cancer vaccine. And it's causing infertility in girls, and it's causing lower sperm count in boys. So, right now, your taxes are footing the bill. Over $7 billion right now are going to pay for children with autism in all of the different programs throughout the country, and there's probably more than that. That's all we're being told. Excuse me. So, I like to quote immunologists. Because, people say, well, Mary, you're not a doctor, why should we listen to you? Well, I go to doctors and I study under them, and I've learned over the years from doctors. Dr. Stephen Marini, I actually had a radio show for 5 years called Healing Our World. It was a talk show through Republic Broadcasting Network out in Austin, Texas. It was called Healing Our World, exposing the things that are harming us and bringing healthy solutions to the table. And Dr. Marini was my first guest, because I had studied under him, and we talked about the immune system. He's an immunologist and a chiropractor. He said, quote, immunologists were taught the immune system is a separate part of the body and is isolated, has autonomy, which means it's self-governing and independent. They had limited knowledge of the natural immune system with no understanding about it. That would be like saying, if I eat an apple, the only thing that's affected is my stomach. Imagine. That's how silly. Like you have this little compartment, your immune system. They knew nothing about the immune system way after they were making vaccines. So they never looked at the systemic effects of the toxins in the human body. I'll talk more about that in a minute. The CDC refuses to do studies like the unvaccinated versus the vaccinated. Over the last, 25, 30 years, I would do a lecture, anywhere from, 50 to 400 people, and I would say, if you have unvaccinated children, and you want to be part of a survey up the road, someday we're going to have a study. And I started accumulating names like that for years. Well, they came out and said, we can't do that study, okay? They said, because it would be unethical to not give someone the vaccine, even though the parents had decided not to do it. Well, I discovered this year, again through AI, you see, AI can be very helpful, that what they do, their control group, is other children who are getting other vaccines. And the new vaccine gets given right along with all the other vaccines, and then the children